I believe everybody needs marriage counseling, and they need it the rest of their whole life. I'm not saying you go to the psychologist and psychiatrist and sit down and tell these people all your problems and they fix it out. We're going to talk about biblical counseling for marriage. If you don't think that marriage is that important, then just let it fall apart. But if you think this is something that God has designed and God wants to keep going, then you should do whatever it takes to keep this going.
The Mike Charleston Show.
All right. Well, welcome to the Mike Charleston Show. And this is Mike, and this is Sarah over here. And as you can see, we are short two people. Larry and Chuck are not going to be joining us today. And the main reason is that by the time you hear this, our oldest daughter is going to be married.
Right.
And
Busy
so
week.
we're doing one a little early, and they just couldn't join us. And so we're going to do one, but we're going to have the same things. Larry's little history lesson is not going to be part of this show. But anyway, we're going to be talking about, what are we going to be talking about today, babe?
We're going to talk about counseling and when do you know that you need to get some help?
Specifically like marriage counseling, right?
Right.
And any other counseling too, but specifically marriage counseling.
Knowledge.
Yeah, so that kind of counseling.
I would say that's a good time to put that one.
Oh, thank you. So anyway, so like we said, this is the week that Abigail is getting married, and that's why there's no more game time with Abigail, and she is moving on, and so it is just us. So why don't we just go ahead and get started with this, babe? Let's go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know first off, when we talked about this, we said we should talk about what counseling is.
What counseling is, because that is kind of it depends on, you got to define your terms, right?
Right.
And a lot of people, I'm going to throw Levi under the bus here real quick. My future son-in-law, which is by the time we see this, is going to be my son-in-law, was a little nervous about the pre-marriage counseling because he was like, do we have to do this? Do I have to go tell about my whole future, my past, not my future, my past, and go through all this stuff? And I was like, I don't think you understand what pre-marriage counseling is. And he went through it, and it was fine. But so we do have to define what counseling is. And counseling is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. The way the world does it is not exactly, they don't do it in a biblical way. And so that's what we want to define. So when we talk about counseling, we do this already in our everyday life. Everyday life, we make big decisions in our lives. And so maybe every day.
Maybe not big decisions every day, but sure.
When we're making a decision, we get some friends around that, ask about our friend or ask about the situation. We might ask a parent. Yeah. Our parents, maybe some elders in church or something like that. Our people at work. You say you're thinking about taking a job somewhere. You're going to talk about people in the industry. You get counsel for these things. When you're a parent, you start, looking around at people that are having kids, and you start picking their brain. Whether you know it or not, you are getting counsel at that point. You are wanting to know a little bit about what they do, how they do things. Whether you're doing a diet, you're trying to lose weight. You get counsel. So that is counseling. I know that in the worldly sense, in counseling, we imagine the person laying on the sofa and the psychiatrist over here asking questions and trying to read your mind and or figure you out in some kind of way and fix you. That is not what we're talking about when we're talking about biblical counseling. When we're talking about counseling, it is getting advice, getting help when you need help. And specifically in marriage, I'm just going to say it right here. I believe everybody needs marriage counseling, and they need it the rest of their whole life. It's something that they need. Now, right there, they're like, well, you mean you sit in with the psychiatrist? Once again, you didn't just hear what we just said. We're going to get into what biblical counseling actually looks like for marriage counseling. I'm not saying you go to the psychologist and psychiatrist and sit down and tell these people all your problems and they fix it out. They might be able to help a little bit, but we're going to talk about biblical counseling for marriage.
Yeah, well, I do think, to be fair and to give Levi a little credit, in the world sense and maybe even in the church, counseling is looked at as something that you go to when there's trouble, when there's
problems.
Yeah, there's
Right.
issues, and so I'm going to go see a counselor.
That's a good point. And that's kind of the point when I say I think everybody that's married needs marriage counseling. What I'm saying is not everybody has problems and needs help.
Right.
I'm saying in order to keep yourself from having problems and stuff, it's a good thing to have counsel. But yes, to his point, yes, we do tend to reserve counseling when it's almost too late.
Right.
But we don't do that in normal life. Like when I'm doing a business venture and I get help, I don't get help when I'm filing bankruptcy. That's not the time to get help. I need an attorney at that point. We don't wait until that. But I think I might be jumping a little ahead. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, because that is the question. I mean, the big question is, when should you involve someone else in your marriage? And we know from experience, we've talked to a number of couples, and they seek help, but we find that it's oftentimes, a decade
Right.
or two, sometimes late. And
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a number of people, and it's like 15 years in, and they're like, wow, 20 years in, and we're having issues. I'm like, well, it didn't just start, did it?
Right.
And in some cases, they were clueless, but, it's the other person wasn't clueless, but they weren't aware of the issues in their own marriage. And maybe if they had some people surrounding their life, they could have brought some of those issues out, or maybe their spouse would have been able to open up a little bit more. But yeah, so what was the main question again there?
So when should you get somebody else involved?
When should you get?
I mean, like we have, as of when this is out, we'll have 3 married children.
Yes.
And so we see many young couples, and then, we see 20 years later when couples hate each other, and we
Right.
think, wow, you should have gotten help a long time ago. So for these newly married couples or people that have just been married, 5, 6, 7,
Right.
8 years, and they feel like things are mostly okay, I mean, you have your ups and downs, just, like everybody talks about.
Right, this is just normal life, right?
Right. And well, that's what you think. And so you just kind of grin and bear it and, roll your eyes or whatever you're going to do. And you just keep going. And until one day you waited too long. So how
Right.
do you know when it's time to go?
Well, for me, the easy answer is from the very beginning, even before you get married, the pre-marriage counseling, it starts there.
Yeah.
You get in that mindset of seeking help, and you don't have all the answers. And I think it's a very prideful thing especially for men. I don't need any help. I know all the answers. And like, no, I want to involve. Now, it's not when we're talking about biblical counseling, especially for marriage and seeking help, it doesn't have to be the typical sit down with someone across the table and open up and tell us what's going on. Because in fact, like in our marriage, we have had very few issues in our marriage, and that would need sit down conversation, no way. But what has helped that is because of our continued education, our continued, the ongoing involving people. Now, when we say involving people, there have been people in our church that has been alongside us, that kept us accountable, and they know us very well. And the way we do church is a little bit different than what most people do church. So I do understand that. It's a lot more relational, and so we are very open with people. But I have read, I don't know how many books I have read on the subject of marriage. 15, 20 at least on my Audible account, at least I have more than 10. And I know I've read plenty. Same thing with parenting books. I have read plenty of parenting books. Why? Because I'm an expert on those subjects? No. That's exactly why I read those books. And so I've involved people like James Dobson into my life, or what's that? Gary Thomas, one of my favorites. He's been a counselor to me. He doesn't know it,
Right.
but because I've read his books, I've gone to podcasts, I've listened to audios of how to improve my marriage. Now, all these books aren't going to be great in everything, but they help in some way that I can take a little bit here. Even the one, like the Eggriches, we read one from them. There was one that I think the Fredericks, I'm not a big fan of theirs, but I took something out of that book. And I'm like, you know what? They had like date night ideas and things like that. And I'm like, whatever, it was fine. I listened to some of their podcasts. It was all right. But guess what? I could take something out.
Yeah.
And this is something that is very important into your life. If you don't think that marriage is that important, then just let it fall apart. But if you think this is something that God has designed and God wants to keep going, then you should do whatever it takes to keep this going and to make it better. And because we don't start out knowing everything and knowing how to do these things even. And so getting a little bit from this person, a little bit from that person and all that helps tremendously.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just natural, kind of like we talked about earlier with the things that you care about. It's natural to keep learning and seeking.
You're talking about like your hobbies.
Right. I mean, like, for so many ladies, they could talk for endless hours about diet, nutrition, and this supplement, and which is fine, but it's, it's not something they just.
You're still wrong mostly, but.
It's not something they just learn. They spent a year learning everything about it, and now it's like they just live their life and go.
Reading up.
They continue to, did you see this supplement? Did you know that they just found this new research that, whatever. And so they're constantly learning. And I feel like if you care about your marriage, then you need to do the same. And you're constantly, open to, a new book or a new podcast that's out there or different resources or just talking to people, So in your marriage, what do you do for fun? Or what do you, just talking to people. And especially when you see another couple that seems to, show signs that they like each other, then those are people that you would want to pick their brains and like find out, what is it that keeps that spark in your eye?
Well, yeah, that's the difference between, unfortunately, the way that we do church in America and in the West, for the most part, the modern church, even the old church. If you're high liturgy churches like the Catholics, Episcopal, all these are not very personal churches. We specialize. And the problem with specializing is it takes out the personal relationship. The Bible doesn't teach that stuff. The Bible teaches things like loving one another, serving one another, all these one another's in the Bible. And the one another's are there very important because God created us as social creatures. Right. We are very social creatures, very, very, very much social creatures. And not just in our own marriages, but we involve other people, friends and church people in our lives. And the church people in our lives, they're on different levels than where we are. Some people are new Christians. Some people have been in the faith for 70 years, and some people are where you are. And so the church is built up of all these individual people. It is not just the job of the pastor or the specialist or the counselor on staff. I was reading a book recently on who should counsel, and he's trying. And in the first 2 chapters of the book was trying to convince pastors to counsel. I would have thought that was
a given.
Yes, of course, that's your job, and I hate to say it like that, but and it's not just the pastor's job. And this is where I think the modern church has failed, where the pastor feels like he has to do everything. His main job should not be to preach a sermon. His main job as a church leader, the main job of a church leader is to be an example. That is the main job, to be faithful, to be knowledgeable about these things, to show that his house is in order, that he loves his wife, that he loves his children, that he can run these things like this. There's a bunch of other people in the church. If you're blessed to be a part of a church that has a number of people, look around. There's got to be people there that have good marriages. Why can't you just sit down and talk to some of these people and pick their brains? It doesn't always have to be the professional counselor that's on staff. Yeah. That we reserve those people for when things are really, really bad. Right. And that shouldn't be. That is, the church should keep each other accountable way before this to sense when things are, are you guys doing all right? Do you want to talk? It doesn't have to be so bad. Like there's just normal times in life where you just get in a rut and we're having problems communicating about this issue or whatever, and bring someone in that you can trust. Right. That's to me, that's the simple thing.
Yep. So you did answer when you should go, and that's pretty much always. Always. We should always be seeking.
I said that is the number one relationship besides Jesus Christ. And even that relationship, I search messages, read books. Right. I want to know Christ more. So my relationship with you I want to read books on how to do that better. Even like the five love languages. I keep mentioning this book, but it's not my favorite book in the world. It's interesting, and I think it falls short on many levels, but it is interesting. Yeah. And there's definitely a lot there that I can learn. And I'm like, hey, well, okay, I didn't really think about this, that maybe I can show love in many different ways and don't just get focused on my only way of showing love, because there is maybe a certain way that I can show love. Yeah. And I got to be a little bit more creative. And it makes you think. I'm all right with that. I can think about that. And it's a good thing to be able to think about.
Yeah. Well, so then I had a question, who should you go to? And I think that's pretty much what you just covered is you look around and you see people that have good marriages. Yes. You look for books and resources. You ask people for things that they have, books they've read or videos or whatever things that they've found that has been helpful to other people.
Yeah, and if you don't like it, then so be it. I've watched plenty of videos or I've tried different books, and I'm just like, I don't like their message. That's fine. You gave it a shot. And you don't have to read the whole thing or whatever, but there are plenty of helps out there and who to go to. So if you have to go personally, so mainly the books and the videos and podcasts, those are more preventative maintenance, I would say. You don't go to those to fix your marriage. Like they are a help at somewhat, but eventually you need to sit down with someone that knows you guys very well or knows you very well. And you can talk and be very open with them, and they can talk back to you. And there's someone that you respect and someone that has been in these battles, someone that is very faithful and they don't have to be perfect, but pretty close, okay. Yeah. But they know what they're doing. It's pretty obvious. And if you're in a good, healthy church that is very relational, you should be able to spot those out. The problem is today in our churches, we don't have that. We show up for the show. We go to the TED Talk and the concert, and it's like, okay, I don't know anybody in this room. I don't know if anybody in here is in my same boat and struggling, or how well they're doing. They look like they're doing very well. But everybody looks well and looks like they're doing well in a
for
concert
an hour
convention.
Or two on a Sunday.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't know what everybody's going through. So in a relational church, or like what we do, and is a house church, it's very personal. Everyone, you get a sense where people are. We've had people come in and out of our church that just kind of visit, and you could tell right away, they ain't coming back, because it's very personal, and they don't want to open up because there's a lot of things going on in their lives. And I get that. It's not easy. It really isn't easy. But if you want a healthy relationship, that is a must. You got to have people, you got to surround yourself with people that know you and that can keep you accountable.
Right. Okay, so I do have a question about, what about, I'm a wife. And so if a lady comes to me and says that she thinks that they need to go to marriage counseling because their marriage is right, and the husband doesn't want to, then what does she do?
So that is the tricky thing. So we're working on a book right now, and the whole premise of the book is it takes two. It doesn't take one person. A marriage takes two people. And if you have one person that is willing to work on it and the other person is not, you definitely have a broken marriage. That doesn't mean you give up, but what it means is it's going to be more difficult. Yeah. But you just know that. But it's still just like anything else that we just talked about in normal life. Forget about the marriage life. Think about your business life. What if your business partner isn't really? You still need advice. You still need direction, and you're willing to seek it out. If your husband's kind of checked out or your wife's checked out on raising kids, well, you still want to better yourself. Yeah. So you still have these relationships with these people. You could still read books and podcasts, and not read a podcast, but listen to a podcast or a YouTube video, whatever it takes to get yourself in the right mind. Because sometimes maybe you are the problem, and you can always, if I sit down with, say, Chuck or Larry and be like, man, I don't know, me and Sarah are not doing so well, and they're like, well, Mike, it's probably you, which it probably would be right, but what's going on? And so I could open up, and maybe there is something that I can do to get through this, because the scriptures do talk about a number of things that God can do just within me, and just without you or the kids or even church. It's God still relates to us very personally. And so going through a hard times, there's plenty of verses about going through those. those hard times. That includes marriage. If you're in a bad place, God can still be with you and can show you those things. So going and getting counsel from a friend is still a very important thing.
It is important. I guess to me, I feel like if a husband is not willing to go, then I would still say that the wife can read books possibly, or, look for whatever resources she can.
Especially your book, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh. And I feel like God's still with her, of course, and she can only be responsible for what she can be responsible for. Right. So, I mean, she, in bringing up to her husband the idea of counseling, if he's like totally close to it, then she needs to just accept that and love him anyway and serve him anyway. Right. And, because I'm going to serve God and I want to please him. And, at some point, maybe that will change and maybe it won't.
It could change. So. You don't know. That's the thing. You go ahead and, like my parents, they went through a rough time years ago and they had some issues in their marriage. And my mom went to counseling. My dad did not want to go. And she went for a very long time by herself. But eventually my dad went. He was like, okay, I think I'm ready for it. And I think he would say this. I don't know. I think he enjoyed it. I think he really liked it once he went, but I think that's a lot of guys. They're afraid, to go. But then when they go, they're like, oh, it's not so bad. It's I actually learned something and it helped, their marriage is a lot better than it was, obviously. And so you don't know when, just by you going like, oh, he's never going to go. You don't know, because maybe he's curious. Be like, well, what do you guys talk about over there? What are you guys doing? What, is it, or maybe it's making some effect a little bit in the marriage and he wants to know what's going on. You don't know. You just don't know. So,
well, do you think it's different for a husband than it is for a wife if the spouse doesn't want counseling?
Absolutely. Yes, because guys don't care. They just don't care. Most guys just, once they're checked out, they're checked out. Women care a little bit more, it seems, in the relationships, and unfortunately. And so if they want to get counseling, guys are like, whatever, just go get counseling. Maybe it's a pride thing. I don't know. But the men, if they are like, hey, I want to get a counselor and all that, it's very rare that a woman's like, no. Yeah. No, I'm not saying that women don't. I mean, we've known a few that don't want to do counseling, and I get it. But it really helps to go together. It really does. So whatever it takes for you to. That's why a lot of this is the preventative stuff is very important. Focus on that. If you're young and you're married, work on that. Don't let the problems grow. Get out there ahead of it and read up on this thing. It's very important. How important are the other issues in your life? Yeah. That you're willing to check up on your hobbies, and read up on those things. How much more your marriage and your family, that's extremely important. Yeah, well, and speaking of important, I feel like we need to touch on a little bit of what the Bible has to say about counseling. Because a lot of people will be like, well, that's nice and good, but the Bible, what does the Bible say about marriage counseling? Well, it really doesn't say anything about marriage counseling per se, but it talks a lot about marriage and it talks a lot about counseling. So, the counseling that we are talking about, the Bible has plenty to say. Right. The counseling that the world offers, the Bible doesn't have much to say about that, and I'm not interested in that. But Proverbs 13:10, what does Proverbs 13:10 say? It says, "Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom." So once again, like we were talking about, most of the time, pride comes up. I don't need any help. If you are a Christian, you already have humbled yourself and say, I can't do this. I need a Savior. I need Jesus. But it seems like that's where it stops. It's like, I can carry it on from here, Lord, and I don't need any more help. But in fact, you still need some help along the way. I wouldn't be where I am now. Not that that's anywhere special, but I wouldn't be where I am right now without all the people in my life helping me along the way. Yeah. Me saying, hey, what do I need to do here? Or I need some help with this. Or what does this verse talk about? Or how do I raise my kids? Or how do I, love my wife more? Or, all the questions I had from the time I was saved till now is all those people have helped out tremendously. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about. So if you're full of pride, you're not going to get that help.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, I mean, we're not that old, but I'm old enough to have seen a few people go through things. And I will say that when you see people that just get married or they're about to get married or in whatever stage of life,
Right.
they're seeking counsel and they're coming and, you see them asking people, what helped you in your marriage or what,
Right.
and they're seeking that advice and you watch them and it's like, they usually do pretty well.
Right.
So, I mean, the Bible's right. Once
Right.
again.
In Proverbs 15:22, why don't you go ahead and read that one?
It says, without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established.
Multiple counselors. So think about that. Getting advice from multiple people. We do that in normal life.
Right.
It's just normal. Hey, I'm going to buy a car. What does my dad think? Especially when you're younger. Maybe not when I'm not asking my dad what he thinks about a car, but unless he's a car guy, and they'll be like, "Hey, Dad, like I'm going to Kenny to ask him about a car because
Right.
he's a car guy. He knows about cars, and other people know things. So, in the same thing with marriage, like that guy's got a good marriage. Let me go check him out. Like just pick his brain a little bit, see what he thinks.
Well, and I think that's where, like you say, in the church, we really fall short in this in most modern churches, institutional churches or whatever,
Right.
because it should be just natural. Just like, when I'm at the group of homeschool moms years ago, it's just easy. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to start homeschooling. What should I do? Tell me what
Right.
you use.
Right.
Did you like this? Did you like this? And it just comes naturally. But all of a sudden when we want to, I'm going to talk to somebody about marriage, it's kind of, we've turned it into some kind of taboo thing.
Probably the problem is also that for young ladies, especially, or women in general, it can turn into a complaining about their husband session
Right.
instead of just. There are times where you need to open up, and those opening ups might sound like a complaint. I get that because there might be a legitimate complaint, and, but hopefully that's together. And but maybe that's the problem. Women are like, I'm going to be I don't want to gossip about my husband, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to gossip. You
Right.
can just say, man, we need some help, but you really need to talk to each other first. Talk about this and say, we need to, and you can do it in a good way. Like, hey, can you read this book, honey? What do you think about, I was reading this book and I've done that to you. And it's not like an in your face type of thing where we're struggling in our marriage. It's just like, hey, I was reading this book. What do you think about it? And that's just, we start talking about it. And I like this aspect of this. And you're like, yeah, I like that aspect too. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. Because I liked it. But anyway.
Okay, I have one more. Proverbs 11:14 says, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety.
So it basically says the same thing. And people who just go out on their own and don't care about what other people think, or, people always say, I don't care what other people think. Well, you should in that way, not like what they think about you, but like, hey, I want some counsel here. I want what you think.
I want to know what you think.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I want to know. Tell me. And because I don't want to make the same mistakes that people have been doing over and over and over in history.
Right.
And I want to learn from their mistakes. And that's the best way, is just talking and be like, you know what, and you don't just get it from one source. And I think that's the problem people do with Bible theology. Mm-hmm. They get it from one source. They listen to Calvin and they're like, that's it. He's got the truth.
Yeah.
Or like Michael Pearl, oh, he's got the truth. And like, it's okay to get a multiple of people and then figure it out what you come up with. That's what we did with our child training. We didn't just get one book and say, this is the answer.
Right.
We pulled from, 10 different people and came up with our own thing with a lot of those ideas because they all had good ideas. There wasn't just one person that had the answers for everything.
Right.
And same thing with marriage. Not one person is going to have the answers for everything, but you start pulling from many people, there is safety in that.
Yeah. Well, and every marriage is unique, just like every child. When you're raising children, you can't raise them all the same because they're each very different.
Right.
It's a different situation. But the same in marriage. It's like we could talk about things that we've done, but not everybody lives the same life that we live.
Right.
Like we're all
and
different.
You have to be aware of that. Right. And that's why it's important. A book is very generic. It gives very basic principles. A podcast like this is very generic. We're giving you broad ideas. The person that you bring with you and sit down and talk to, they know you. And that's very important. You have a relationship there. They know your lifestyle. It's, right, well, I don't homeschool my kids. Exactly. That's why, our suggestion may be a little bit different because we're a homeschool family. You don't have the same issues that maybe we have, but your friends at your church might be able to, and some of the other people. So it's very important to get local help. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question.
One more.
Where shouldn't you go for counsel?
Oh, where shouldn't you go? Sigmund Freud. You shouldn't go to your friends.
I was going to say, I thought of friends because I feel like, especially young people, they just get married and it's fine to have friendships and that's great. But when you're trying to make decisions and so then you go to all your peers.
Yeah, your peers are usually they're just going to pat you on the back and think everything you do is wonderful. Those aren't your best people to go counseling with, but hopefully by the time you get to like our age, which is close to 50, and not exactly telling you our age, but you can figure out with 3 married kids, and our close friends are going to be close to our age, and so eventually you are going to have similar people, similar age,
right?
But you can still reach out. I have friends that are 70. I don't know about 80 yet, but they're getting there. Some people that are even younger, but I don't really. I pick their brains for other reasons. I'm not getting counsel from younger people so much. But your peers, especially if you're younger, those are absolutely the worst. They are not gonna. They don't want to upset the apple cart because they don't want to lose a friend.
Right.
And so they're not going to be very blunt with you. Whereas I could come in and talk to a 24-year-old and be like, look, man, I care and I see what's going on here. And this is not good. This is bad. Yeah. And if they don't want to talk to me ever again, well, it's not going to, I'm not worried about that, because I want to help. And I think they know that at that point. But your friends, they're going to be like, dude, whatever you want to do, man, whatever. Or they'll sympathize with you. But most likely they'll be like, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm in the same boat. Right. I'm trying to figure out the same thing, dude. And you might have some wise friends. I'm not saying all friends are bad. But
right. But if that's when you're looking around at all the people that you're seeking counsel from and they're all just your friends, well...
Yeah, usually seeking counsel from the people in your same situation is always bad. And I see that on Facebook all the time, that people are in these groups and clubs, and it's like divorcees all congregate and they all talk bad about their spouses. And I'm like, that's not helping anybody.
Right.
So that's not doing any good. Or, kids that have had problems with parents, they all get together and talk bad about their parents. And it's like, well, okay, this isn't helping. All you're doing is feeding off each other. It's not actually accomplishing a thing. So it's your decisions to, as a young person especially, you need to be more mature and reach out above you and say, hey, let me talk about the 45-year-old, 55-year-old, 60-year-old person. And they have experience. They've been humbled by life a little bit more.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's... I was to say, I see great danger from people going onto Facebook chat rooms or whatever, and I go and I could share my problems, and it's so easy there because I'm not face to face with anybody, and I can just complain, and then I get all these people with all this advice and things that they want to offer.
Care button. I love you.
Yeah, and it feels really good, and I feel like, but
you go, girl. You're the greatest.
Right, but you can get so much bad counsel there, and these people don't. They don't even care. They don't even know you, so they could just be like, "Oh, I would leave him, or I would do this, or I would tell him this," and it's just so easy for them to just flippantly say whatever, and you're taking that counsel and you're going to change your life course based on what somebody on Facebook said.
Comment.
So.
Yeah, get it from people and your churches is a good place to start, but your big mega churches, unfortunately, they specialize, and it's going to be harder, but you can look around, get to know some people, and hopefully some of them have some good marriages. And so,
and also, the Bible does say that God gives us His Spirit, and it says the Spirit will lead us into all truth. So, go to the Word of God and pray and ask God to help you to find people that you could look to and go to.
Scriptures are your best counsel, that's for sure. But sometimes we're so in the situation where we can't see through the tree sometimes, and it does help to have other people help us navigate us through that area. All right, well, that's it for this topic, and I hope you enjoyed it. Email us if at my talk at Fellowship of Believers. I almost gave my own personal email. Talk at Fellowship Believers if you have any suggestions or things that you've done in the past, and we'd love to read those and love to see. So anyway, go ahead and get us out of here, Joshua.